Thanks, Jerry.
Yep.
Jerry has seen some ups and downs for me, that's for sure. I'm James, alcoholic. Any newcomers in here tonight? First meeting?
Awesome.
Glad you guys are here. And, I when I go to any AA meeting, even as a speaker, if I'm speaking in front of someone, I'd like to know that there's newcomers here, because that's really, that's what I want you to hear tonight is is hope. I want you to hear that there's an answer, that there's a way of life that you can live that's happy, joyous, and free. So I'm glad you guys are here. I've spoken before a few times. Some of you have heard my story. Some of you are going to hear some things you heard before, but you might hear some things that sound a little bit different. Not necessarily that the facts have changed, but that my perception, my reflection on what I've done and the way my life has gone have maybe changed a little bit. So some of those things may be a little bit different. Again, the other thing that I hope you take away from here tonight, from my story, my experience, is hope, and maybe a little bit of information about Alcoholics Anonymous. This is my experience. This is my story. It's not. I don't think it's going to be sort of I'm not an AA guru. I'm not a perfect AA person. I've done a lot of things. I think I've done some things right. I've done a lot of things wrong. But this is my story, okay? And that's all I can do tonight, is just try to be honest and truthful about, how I got here today, okay? So I'll just kind of start with some basics. I grew up, born and raised, grew up in Lubbock, Texas, up in the Panhandle. I did move here when I was a freshman in high school and lived here for most of the rest of my life. There was a period of time in my adult life when I lived in Dallas and Houston and a couple of other places, and went to school and did some other things. But I'm from Texas. I'm a Texan, whatever that really means. But I think if you're a Texan, you know exactly what that means. But grew up, my mom and dad, good people. I would say that they both did their best to love me in the way that they knew how to do that. I have an older brother and an older sister. I'm 55 years old. I have an older brother and an older sister. So I was the youngest. And being the youngest, at least in my family, was pretty awesome, because there was a lot of shit that went on in my family that I might have seen, but I didn't necessarily get the brunt of it. And so when I say that, I think that was a benefit. I think it was a benefit just in terms of where I ended up and when I was born. The other thing I will say about tonight is that you may hear some F-bombs or some stuff come out of my mouth. I hope that doesn't offend anyone, but I have to be reminded of that sometimes, especially I think Jerry alluded to it, I'm a lawyer, but I certainly can't lay F-bombs when I'm in court and do some other things, but God knows I do when I'm in the office. And so anyway, growing up, there was some, and let me just say a little bit about, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm going to talk about kind of my history and some things that led up to being here today. And I'll talk about what it means for me to be an alcoholic, and it jives with what's in our book. Okay, I'm not an alcoholic because of something that happened to me. I'm not an alcoholic because of the way I was treated or the way I was raised or trauma or anything like that. I'm an alcoholic because I have an allergy to alcohol, that when I put alcohol in my system, it changes me. It changes the way that I feel. And then I have that in conjunction with an obsession that I have makes me want to continue drinking. And that's why I'm an alcoholic. And one of the reasons I mentioned that is for a long time through my drinking career, for lack of a better term, I tried to figure out why I drank. Why do I do this? Why am I doing this? What's going on? If this was better, if this was different, maybe I wouldn't do this, all of that. And in my mind, I wasted a lot of time trying to figure that out. And it didn't really work. So, but backtracking a little bit, I think it's important to understand kind of a little bit about what went on with me, because even though I'm not an alcoholic because of these things, it affected me in a way that I think affected my alcoholism. It affected the way that I drank. It affected the way that I went about trying to be recovered. And it's just part of my story. It's part of who I am. In my childhood, I witnessed a lot of violence. I grew up in a household where I had a father that there was one point in time I would probably characterize him as an alcoholic, but I realized that I'm not the person to make that determination. I think only he would be. And today, I don't know that he was or not. I have a much different view of him today than I did growing up as a young man and even as an adult. I think he probably did the best that he could with the tools that he had, and I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. But it was a household for me that you walked on eggshells all the time, and you never knew when it was going to happen. You never knew what would set him off, or what the outcome would be. Was it going to be just a thorough lashing of yelling at you or whatever, or was it going to be a beating of some sort or whatever? And so, and as a kid, that was a normal thing. I thought everybody's life was that way. And those things continued on throughout being a young person. My parents did divorce when I was 10, and a little bit later on we moved to San Angelo. My dad stayed in Lubbock, but the relationship I had with him, and again, I didn't really think there was anything different about it until I had somebody, I was in high school, point out to me that getting in a fist fight with your dad was not a normal thing. That as a teenager, I was perfectly fine until I walked up here. Anyway, as a teenager, that it was not a normal thing to have fistfights with your dad. It was not a normal thing to have to physically defend yourself. And I'd witnessed, that was part of what I grew up with. I'd witnessed some other things throughout that time, some violence against my mom, and some other women that were in my dad's life. And again, that was, seeing those sorts of things and being involved with that affected me in a way then that I didn't realize until later on, honestly, until I was an adult, and honestly until I'd, came into Alcoholics Anonymous and tried to get recovered, that it affected the way that I treated people around me. It affected the way that I reacted to people. It was one of those things. And again, I mention that because that's part of my story, and it's important when I start talking a little bit about the steps, and in particular, making amends, resentments, things of that nature. So, growing up, I wasn't a great student, but I think I worked hard. The one thing I will say that I did get from my dad, and I do attribute this to him, is that you work hard for what you get, and if you want something, you you work very hard at it. You don't give up. You do whatever you can. You fix it. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You get it done. You can't rely on anybody else but yourself. And part of that was instilling a good work ethic in me, but the other part of that was instilling the fact that if you can't get it done, no one can. And for an alcoholic, sometimes that's not a great thing to have. My drinking as a young man was, I can remember the first time I ever tasted alcohol. I think I was probably like 8 years old. I stole a beer out of my dad's refrigerator and went out in the back and decided I was going to drink a beer, and had one drink of it and spit it out. Thought that's the nastiest shit I've ever tasted. What am I, and poured it out, and then I was, scared shitless for the next 2 weeks because I thought my dad would find out I stole one of his beers. But I would do that. I would do things like, steal my granddad's cigarettes and cigars and go smoke them all in the back and do stuff like that. Stuff that, I think, just that normal kid, wanting to see stuff. I did that, but I enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed doing stuff like that. I enjoyed trying to be sneaky, I guess, is one way to put it. It wasn't until I was a little bit older when the first time I really drank alcohol. I was 12 years old. I was in 6th grade. Me and 3 of my buddies convinced some older brother to go buy a case of beer, and we all had a 6-pack of beer, and we all went in the bathroom. We were going to drink a 6-pack of beer each, and we learned somebody taught us how to shotgun a beer, and so we did that a few times, and it was, if you can just imagine a small bathroom with four 12-year-old kids in it trying to drink a bunch of beer, it was a complete nightmare. And but you know what? I drank 6 beers. I downed those things. I drank them. I had my buddies were sick and throwing up and doing everything else, and I drank them. And I was so inebriated and so drunk. And even I think about it now, if I drank 6 beers, I'd be pretty drunk, probably, most likely. And but as a 12-year-old kid who had never had alcohol before, I was falling down intoxicated. I remember having to walk home several blocks and falling down, literally falling down in people's yards, not being able to see, finally getting home, throwing up, my mom like, oh my God, what happened? What'd you eat? Or whatever, all of this, thinking that was something wrong with me. I remember she stuck me in the car and drove me to the high school to watch my brother play in some band concert or something. And the whole time she's just like, well, I wonder what it was that you ate. And I'm like, I don't know, Mom. I'm barfing everywhere. And so it was pretty bad. I mean, I was a pretty sick kid. And the next day, the one thing, and of course this is hindsight, this wasn't something at the time I recognized, but the very next day, I woke up and I was like, man, I'm going to do that again. There was something about that, the way that made me feel, even though the sickness and the throwing up and the falling down and all of that, but there was something about it that hit me. So, when I look back about, am I an alcoholic? Is this something that I had, or is it because of my upbringing or anything else? I had it, because that was a feeling that normal people don't get. That's not something that you have, is that after all that pain and suffering, that's something I'm going to do again. Through the years as a teenager and through high school and college, I don't know that my drinking was any different than anybody else's that I hung out with. And most of them are probably alcoholics, but it was, the typical party. I mean, it was just, you got drunk on the weekend, you did, but in my mind, when I look at it, I was constantly trying to find. It was very important for me to find alcohol. Alcohol, drugs. Eventually, it was. I didn't really discriminate at a certain time in my life. It was, whatever I could, get lit on. That was kind of what I did. I got through high school. I did go to college. I was a terrible student my first year. I, rarely went to class. Almost flunked out of school. Because my time was spent doing other things than going to class. It was going to parties and getting jacked up and doing whatever I could. Finally got it together enough. It took me a bit of time to graduate from college. I ended up getting married during that time. I was 22 years old. My wife was 19. I thought I knew everything. I thought I was an adult. I thought I knew how the cow ate the cabbage, and got married. And of course, again, in hindsight, there's just a wonderful thing. You look back, and I didn't know shit. I was a young kid that, had a budding alcohol problem, and I thought I knew everything. We ended up having, we had 3 kids when I was married. I eventually did go to law school. I did pretty good in law. I did pretty well in law school. I was, I tried really hard. I worked hard. I wasn't the smartest guy in the room, but I think I worked harder than a lot of other people. But lived in Dallas, and of course during this time it was not. I wouldn't go out and get drunk every night. I wasn't doing those things. I mean, I would have a drink here and there, and I would drink some. And when I did drink, I would probably drink a little more than I needed to. But it wasn't something that, if I look back on, at least at that point in my life, was a big, huge red flag. Now, after working as a young attorney for a couple of years and when I say working, it was, my hours of the day were basically 7 a.m. to office until about 9 p.m. in the office. And that's just what you did, and that was fine, and I didn't have a problem with that. I like to work. Part of the problem with that when you have a young family is that you're not around, and you can't be a dad, you can't be a husband, you can't be doing those things. And so those stresses, those things in my life, my career, my lack of being a father and husband and all of those things, eventually alcohol, became much, much more important for me. And, the book talks about how alcoholism is a progressive disease, and it absolutely is. I mean, I look back on it. There were periods of time when it was, somewhat abated, but it was always there, and it always got worse. That led to, what the book talks about, the bedevilments. Problems with our relationships, problems with controlling our emotions. Anger, all of these things, these bedevilments that we get. And I had all that. And I had all that just like a lot of people have all that. But the one thing that I did is that I turned to alcohol and started drinking more regularly, got to the point where I was not only a daily drinker, but I was get to the point where I'd wake up in the morning and I'd say, man, I'm not going to drink today. I'm just not going to do it. And by about, 8:45 in the morning, I was thinking of ways that I could go out and drink at lunch, drink that day, stay late at work, drink at the office, whatever it was. It was a plan. My brain was trying to figure out how I could get that sense of ease and comfort that I got from the first time that I drank, and that's what I did. I'm going to kind of skip around a little bit, but or kind of fast forward through some things because I'm old and there's a lot going on. But I divorced, and I would say that during that divorce is when things really kicked into full gear for me in terms of my drinking and It affected my job. It affected my relationships with my family, with my children. Every aspect of it. And if you're in this room, it probably means at some point in time when you walk through the door, things weren't really going your way. And so I'm hopefully you can relate to the things that I'm talking about. Is that that unmanageability. I had a life that was not. I could not manage. I mean, me being a manager of anything was a joke. It just didn't happen. I got up in the morning and tried to get through the day. That was basically it. And that continued on. I eventually left Dallas. I went and was a general counsel for a company that a buddy of mine owned, thinking that change of scenery would help me and do something, and it didn't help at all. If anything, it made things worse. It did pick me up another wife, and where I went, that's where I met her, and that was, it was sort of a relationship built on drinking and partying and other things, and it is what it is. It was a relationship that I had, and it happened, and it's that marriage ended after not a very long time. But finally got back to San Angelo. Now I will say this: during that time when I came back to Dallas after living. I lived down in San Antonio. I came back to Dallas, and during my first divorce, I was going to see a counselor. And now, granted, during this time, alcohol was not an issue. Okay, I never thought about alcohol. Me being an alcoholic, I never called myself an alcoholic. I didn't think anything about it. I drank because, God, that's the only thing I can do that's going to keep me sane. And I would go to this counselor, and this counselor would, I would tell her all my problems and just spew all this shit at her for a while. And at the end of every session, she would always say to me, you might want to go over here to this treatment center. Maybe they can talk to you about this. And I'm like, did you hear anything I just said? Did you just hear all the shit that I just told you about? And you want me to go? That's the one thing that's helping me. Why would I want to do that? And so I was befuddled by her suggestion that I needed to go to some sort of treatment or get treatment for my alcohol use. During that divorce, I can remember sitting in my divorce lawyer's office and signing divorce papers and being just distraught at how my life had turned to shit, and my my three beautiful kids were I wasn't around them anymore, and all this other stuff, and just being a real sorry sack. And my lawyer said to me, and this was in Dallas and kind of a Preston area. And she says, there's a group right around the corner over here that maybe you should go see sometime. What's that? Oh, it's an AA group. And I'm just like, God damn it. What is the deal here? And so, I'm pretty hard-headed. But my point is that the signs were certainly there. Certainly the people around me recognized that there was a problem. I did not go to that group at that time. It took me some additional time and a few more years of tearing my life down before I did. But I eventually did make it to that group, and it was the Preston group in Dallas. I was very fortunate. I came in. I didn't know what Alcoholics Anonymous was. I just knew I wanted to stop the way I was feeling. And I will tell you that the reason that I showed up to that group in the first place is that the thought finally occurred to me one day that I might have an issue with alcohol. So I should probably stop. I should probably not drink. No big deal. And after about, 4 hours or whatever it was that particular day, there was a huge realization came over me that, oh shit, I can't stop drinking. Not only can I not stop drinking, I don't really want to stop drinking, but I do want to stop drinking. I was at that jumping off place that the book talks about, that point where I can't see my life going on with alcohol, and I can't see my life going on without alcohol. And so that's what got me into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous to begin with. But coming into AA, I didn't really know what it was. I really didn't. I had no idea what it was. I just knew you went there if you had an alcohol problem. And it was a little confusing to me, honestly, going into a meeting and hear people share about some things, and they're talking about God, and they're talking about these other things, and I'm like, man, I don't know what I've got myself into here. I grew up, believing in God. I felt like I was a spiritual person. That wasn't something that really, that I didn't believe. I had some experiences in my life that I think were, if you want to call it a miracle, if you want to call it divine intervention, whatever you want to call it, but I didn't have a problem with that. But when I walked in and I felt like I could admit that I was powerless over alcohol, because I think I was at that point. But then when I realized that this is not somebody telling me, hey, you got to do this, and these are the practical things you can do, and that's really what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is. But that's not what I heard. What I heard was, you're fucked, okay? You're screwed, and only if something that you cannot feel, hear, or see is going to save you. And that was hard for me, because that's not who I was. I was a get it fixed, find out what the problem is. If I don't understand it, figure it out. If I've got a problem, get some more information, solve it. That's what it was. And so that was a bit confusing to me. What I learned, though, in Alcoholics Anonymous, and this was thanks to a really good sponsor that I had, who I didn't realize he was a really good sponsor at the time until later. But I thought he was just kind of square and didn't really understand my complex problems and everything that went on. But he knew AA. He knew the steps. He knew what to do. But one of the things that I learned is that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is about that I didn't have to bite off. I didn't have to swallow entirely the whole concept of that God is going to change me, that God is going to fix my problems. I didn't have to swallow that all at one time. What I had to do was to have some willingness to be honest, and to be willing to do some things and to work some steps, and to have some humility, and God would do the rest. And that was my experience. I started working the steps with this person, and before long, that obsession to drink and to use, and that was the thing early on that really was foremost in my brain and foremost in my life all the time, was that obsession, because there was not a day that went by that I didn't think about drinking or using. And it wasn't just, I'm going to have a beer or whatever. It was, man, I gotta get something right now. I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm going to figure out whatever I can do during my day to get to the point where I've got that drink in my hand, or I'm drinking what I'm drinking, or I'm doing what I'm doing in order to feel better. And it grabbed a hold of me, and it was scary. I mean, that obsession is a frightening thing, especially in that time that got me into AA. That's what it was, is that I realized that obsession was real. It wasn't something I could get rid of on my own. But working the steps, going through, doing some things, one day I woke up and I didn't have that obsession anymore. And that was one of many things in my life that showed me that God was real. That God was real because that thing that I could not fix, no matter how much knowledge I had about anything, it was gone like that. And So, in this group and in other groups too, but in this group in particular, we call ourselves recovered alcoholics. And, the book says it's not a cure, but we have a daily reprieve. And for me, it is a cure. I mean, it really is. It's a cure. Now, can I screw it up? Absolutely. And I did. But it took that away. It was a way for me to find God. It was a way for me to find that power that the book talks about, to solve my problems. I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous that lack of power was my dilemma. That was something that I could really grab a hold of. More power. I need more power. I need that. Give me some more power. I can control this. I can do that. But what the book is saying, though, is that it's not your power. It's God's power. That lack of power is what you have is a lack of power. You don't have the power of God in your life. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous did for me. It also, selfishness and self-centeredness, that's another thing. And to me, the whole lack of power and those things go hand in hand because in order for me to recover, I had to understand that I couldn't do it on my own. And that my behavior, my wanting to do it on my own, my wanting to control things, thing that my dad, instilled in me, all of those things that can be good, but at the same time, limited me in listening to somebody else. Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me that there's ways that I can get rid of that I can get rid of that selfishness, I can get rid of that self-centeredness, and be a happy, joyous person in life. One of the I know I'm skipping over a whole lot of stuff. It's funny, you have an idea of what you want to talk about, and you get up here and you're like totally not even doing it. It's totally something different, and that's God. Before I came in here, I was talking to Gabe on the phone, and I told him, and I'll just tell you, I had a week, man. It was very busy, and it was a short week. I mean, some of y'all were probably working all week, but my office was closed on Monday because of President's Day, and so I had 4 days, but it was like full. I mean, I had hearings, I had mediations, I had depositions, I had all this stuff going on, and then I had to prepare in my mind for a talk at San Angelo Solution Group on Friday night, and let's just say that my grand plans of preparing and sitting down and spending a lot of time were met with "You're not in charge, James." And that's just sort of that's an indication of kind of the way my life is and the way that really all of our lives are. I had yesterday, I had depositions all day long. So I'm in a small room with probably 6 other people, 6 other people. And all day long, and I get home and it's late and I put my foot up and I'm taking off my shoe and I look down at my shoes and I had one brown shoe on and one black shoe on. I mean, and I'm like, what in the hell? But it was, it was just a reminder to me that I don't have it together, okay? I mean, there are things that happen in my life that I don't control. Now, I will say that's probably from the lack of sleep and other things and probably getting dressed in the middle of the night or the middle of the morning when there's no lights on because my wife doesn't like me to turn lights on when I get up. But it was kind of crazy. This morning I got up and I'm on my way to work and I look at my watch and I'm like, oh, it's 5 till 8. And a few minutes later, I'm doing something else. I look at my watch. I'm like, oh, it's 5 till 8. And realizing my watch had stopped working. And so, it's just sort of constant things going on. And the reason I mention that is that, the things that happen in my life today, honestly, are not that much different than things that happened in my life 20 years ago. I still have problems. I still have issues. I still have anger, fear, resentment. I still have arguments with people. I still have problems in my relationship. I don't. That is the first time I put on two pair of different shoes, but at least I think so. But those things happen. The difference today is that it's here. It's the way that I handle it. It's the way that I look at it. It's my attitude about it. Am I perfect about it? Absolutely not. There are days that I really struggle. There are days that I can be a real a-hole to people, but it's a different time. Okay, my point is that life goes on, but recovery is about going through life and being happy. It's about going through life and handling it a certain way. So, I initially got sober. I had a few sobriety dates on and off for, I'd have one here, I'd last 6 months, and I'd go drink again or whatever, then I'd get another one. And so I got sober in 2009, the end of 2009, and ended up coming to San Angelo, went to a group over here, met Jerry and Chris not long after that. And those guys have been really, Jerry in particular, I will say, Chris also, but and other people, Doug. Doug was there. Met Doug early on. But people in my life that have been instrumental and have been helpful, more than helpful. They've helped save my life in Alcoholics Anonymous, and those are guys like that. They've taken the time to not only help me to understand what being in Alcoholics Anonymous is about, but what being a good person is, and I appreciate that. I appreciate everything. So this is sort of, and I'm kind of running out of time, but I want to get to a certain point. So I had about 12 years of sobriety. I'd gotten remarried. Life was good. I was, in AA. I wasn't around AA. I didn't just go to me. I was in AA. I sponsored people. I, did those things. I didn't do them very well. And one of the things about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that I've seen is that the little bit of effort you put into AA, the little bit of effort you do that, yields some tremendous rewards. And so, for guys like me who are not fully in AA all the time and sponsoring 8 people like Kitty over here, or 10 people or whatever, and you can still be sober, successful, and helpful, and you can help other alcoholics. You can still do that. But my point is that, so I was doing that, and but eventually I stopped doing that. I got, for lack of a better term, lazy and complacent. I don't really want to go to a meeting. I'm tired. I'd rather do this. I'd rather do that. I'd rather do whatever. I don't really have time to sponsor people. I don't, and it wasn't, some of it wasn't really a conscious decision. It was more of a creeping up on you type decision that happened for me. And the book talks about it. The book is very specific about it, about how alcohol is cunning and baffling. It also talks about how not enlarging your spiritual life is a real problem. That if I'm not connected to God, if I'm not connected to the sunlight of the Spirit, if I'm doing things that are blocking me from the sunlight of the Spirit, if I have resentments and anger and fear and all of these things, and I don't do anything about it, then God is just there. He's not with me. He's just there. And that's what happened in my life, is that I stopped doing those things. And, and it sounds like one of these things, even when I repeat it today, it's hard for me to even say, is that one day a drink didn't look like that bad of an idea to me anymore. And you can't really explain it. I can't rationalize it. I can't do anything else. All I can say is that I'm an alcoholic. And that's what happened, is that I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I didn't continue working the steps. I absolutely didn't continue helping people. And today I know for a fact that the one thing that I can do is help another alcoholic, and that's going to keep me sober. That's going to help me. It's going to help them, and that's something that happens, and I didn't do that. I picked up another drink. I went out. I drank, probably 2 years, I guess. I didn't lose everything. I didn't lose my wife. But I could have very easily. I didn't lose my job. Of course, I'm on business, so it's kind of hard to do that. But you can do that pretty easily. And but those things didn't happen. But I will tell you what did happen is that I still had a head full of AA and a heart full of AA. And I got to a point, and I could see, I was cognizant enough that I could see the writing on the wall once again, and I walked back into this room. Amen. And so if you're walking in this room for the first time or coming back or anything else, just know that I want you to feel hope. That not only can you get sober, but you can stay sober. And if you relapse, if you go back out, if you do it or whatever, slip, whatever the hell you want to call it, it doesn't matter. Come back in, because you can get sober. So my new sobriety date is May 1 of 2023. So I don't even have a year right now, but it is what it is. I like to say that I've had a whole lot of years of sobriety, just not all in a row. Kind of like I've been married a whole lot of years, just not in a row. But I'll leave you with this: is that there's a couple things in the book that are in. Last time I was up here, I mentioned this, and I know other people mention them too. But it's something that I think about a lot with Alcoholics Anonymous. Actually, before I get to that, I want to say one thing, because I said I was going to say something about it, and I talked about my dad. And when I did my fourth and fifth step, it was pretty much full of my dad. The resentments that I had were, not unjustified, I'll put it that way. But what the beauty of this program, the beauty of the steps and the taking the actions and the doing those things showed me that I had a part in everything that happened. Okay? Was I the cause of certain things? No. But I had a part in it on some level. And I was able to recognize that. The other thing I was able, that I think is important that's in this book, is the sick man's prayer. My sponsor at the time told me, and we talk about how you've got to get rid of these fears and resentments because those things are blocking you off. You've got to clear clear your plate, whatever, however you want to look at it. And it was really difficult for me to do that. We read that prayer, the sick man's prayer, and he said, look at your dad like somebody that's sick, that he's got an illness, that he's doing the best that he can with the illness that he's got. And how are you going to treat that sick person? If somebody's got a disease, are you going to, ridicule them or be angry at them for having that disease or doing those things? No. You want to try to be helpful to that person. And doing that, at least saying those words, looking at it that way, also recognized in myself that I'm a sick person, that the things that I did in my life were certainly I had a part in. I needed to take responsibility for those things. but at the same time, forgiving him, looking at him in a different light, helped forgive me, helped look at me in a different way. And, there's a lot of shame and other things that go along with, being an alcoholic and an addict. And that's one thing that I would encourage you to look at is getting rid of those resentments, and that fear was freeing, was absolutely freeing for me. I mean, it really was. It was blocking, like I said, blocking me off from the sunlight of the Spirit. Anyway, so, okay. On page 15, so, life goes on. I have really hard days sometimes. I have really great days, much more great days now than I used to. But the book talks about, in Bill's story, there's part of that story where he talks about how, he and his wife were going around and trying to help other alcoholics, and this was early on. They didn't have a big book, they didn't have all these other things. They were just trying to go help, and he was like barely sober. And part of it, he says that, and I'm just going to read it. It says, "My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. It was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time, and I was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment." That does not sound like a guy that's doing great. "This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink, but I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is designed for living that works in rough going." So, early on, he recognized that, being sober is not just about being sober. It's about helping other people and helping other alcoholics. And so I try to remember that when, I'm like, well, I don't really want to call this guy, or I don't want to do it, whatever, I don't feel like doing it. It's not about me. It's about doing that and helping that other person do that. Another thing in the book, and this is back in the stories, it's back in a story called Alcoholic Anonymous number 3. It's about a guy that helped AA in Canada get started. And I'm sorry, it's called Gratitude in Action. I put it on the page. Gratitude in Action, but it is about the guy from Canada. But he was talking about getting sober. And of course, this is back in like 1944 or something. And he'd had all these problems. He decided to get in touch with AA in New York. They sent him a book. He started writing letters back and forth to New York. And I'll just read it. It says, "I was very surprised when I got a copy of the big book in the mail the following day, and each day after that, for nearly a year, I got a letter or a note, something from Bobby or from Bill or one of the other members of the central office in New York. In October 1944, Bobby wrote, 'You sound very sincere, and from now on, we will be counting on you to perpetuate the fellowship of AA where you are. You will find enclosed some queries from alcoholics' letters. We think you are now ready to take on this responsibility.' She had enclosed some 400 letters that I answered in the course of the following weeks. Soon I began to get answers back." So I would just remind you, when you think that things are tough, or that's going to take too much of my time, or I can't talk to that person, or I can't do that, think of that guy. He had 400 letters. When's the last time you replied to 400 letters? When's the last time you replied to any letter? I mean, it's just one of those things that doesn't happen a whole lot. But, I'm like, and they say it sort of in passing. And I'm thinking, pay attention to that, because that's something that is a difference in somebody that is around AA or somebody that's in AA, okay? I have gratitude today. I have an awareness of gratitude, but I also hope that I have an expression of gratitude to the people around me. And I've not always been good at that. One of the things that certainly I've learned in AA is that I am a flawed human being just like everybody else. I've also learned that there's a good and bad in the best of us, and a bit of good in the worst of us. And that goes for everybody. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you're living under a bridge or sitting in a corporate boardroom or driving a truck or doing whatever. It doesn't matter. We're all humans. We all deserve to be loved. And anyway, I'm really grateful for AA. I'm grateful that you guys asked me to speak. And thank you for letting me do that.